All right. Now, you have stated in the past that given the rather strict time crunch that you were under, you obviously didn't have time to determine such aspects as how many decks there were or the exact crew complement of the ship. But, having all these years to mull it over and take in your design, what would you say about such things now? I mean, looking at the ship from the side, the saucer is comparable to the 42 decks of the Enterprise D, and just a little slightly bigger, so maybe 50 decks at its thickest area.
But this way, it's much bigger.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, I've never really spent a lot of time because I work every day and I have other things I have to do, you know. But Star Trek is always on my mind, and I do think about these things. But but it's always been in generalities. You know, I would say that the crew has to be in 10,000 plus. You know, it's less about a crew running the ship and more what I think Gene was thinking of with the D when we first saw the ship, with the families and stuff like that. That it was like a multi-generational ship almost. It really is more like a city in flight than any of the other ships. There are suburbs, and university, and it has everything a city would have,
And what do you think about when you look at the scale, having it only be about as thick as the Enterprise D? I say only. I mean, it's a very thin ship, but still in context. People don't realise it's still the bit thicker than the D. It's kind of interesting.
Well, that's still a lot more room than the Enterprise D is. It's hugely
it's more relatable when you say that. People don't think of it in context, but it's interesting that that sort of design.
People freak out because it dwarfs one of the space stations that we've seen in some of the old movies. But that's the idea, is to you want people from 200 years earlier or from Picard's era to look at it and go, oh my God.
Can I hit your lift and learn? So you've said that the mission of the ship would likely be exploring other galaxies, so ultimately the universe, and so you've kind of like the name Universe class because of that. So to explore the universe, which is a fairly big place, you have to speculate this ship is quite likely to be able to fold not only space but potentially time as well. So do you see this ship as being a temporal explorer of sorts, or do we leave that to 29th century and 31st century time agents?
No, I mean, it's like, look at the original series. They in Assignment Earth, they were on a temporal survey mission to figure out how Earth survived in 1968. So I have to assume that we're going to continue doing that, very carefully. For all I know, we have temporal kinds of shields that keep us from
Voyager developed some for Year of Hell, so it's possible.
Maybe they went back and saw the creation of the universe, witnessed the Big Bang.
Absolutely.
It's a tourist destination for time travelers, don't worry.
All right, so given the familiar blue glow of what looks like warp coils, we can probably surmise that the ship still does use warp. Since warp is exponential, though, do you think that she has gone from warp 9.975 of Voyager to warp 9.99999, which is still hugely faster, and has slipstream or transwarp capability? Voyager has experience with the far faster transwarp thanks to the Dauntless, and in side canon novels, transwarp becomes a staple of the Vesta and Titan and such. So do you think slipstream would probably be her standard method of travel, or, as we've mentioned earlier, folding technology that makes travel far more instant, like transwarp?
More like Galactica, where you jump. You're not actually moving from one place to another. You're actually jumping there, and you could probably arrive before you leave. Don't you love that?
That would be a time saver. I'd like that.
But what do you think? Slipstream as well? I mean, conventional, you're using backup drives, or is it very much reliant on the space folding?
It's got all of them. Maybe the nacelles reconfigure themselves to whatever they need, standard warp, whatever, and that's why you were talking about earlier. It wasn't attached for.
That's interesting. That's a good concept.
So
that's like, they're so small. That's the warp configuration. They get bigger, they become the transwarp version. Bigger, it's the fold space version.
What are you saying, that the engines grow? So
they morph.
Yeah, they morph into the housing. That's why the housing is much bigger.
You could. It's fun. It's a fun idea. Could be. Why not?
Yeah, the end of the nacelle struts are just like replicators and transporter technology, and they can transport, make whatever engines they want.
I like it. I like it.
So,
It's a fun idea. Why not? You know.
So one part of the design I want to ask about quickly. Between the warp pylons, there's a light blue dome that looks like a homage to Andrew Probert's Impulse Crystal on Enterprise Refit. But on a ship this scale, and this dome being about 75% as wide as the NX-01 saucer, tell us what this is, Doug.
It's a visual touchstone, you know.
Hey, to be fair, that could be like the observatory, the dome that everyone goes. It could be like a big stadium where people just go and enjoy space.
The ultimate planetarium.
Yeah, that'd be kind of neat, actually.
Yeah. Maybe it's water. Maybe it's like a giant lake where they keep the dolphins.
Yes.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, so let's talk about size and scale now. You estimated the length of the ship at about 2 miles long, or 3,218 meters. Now, while that seems big, it really isn't when you think about other ships from other sci-fi franchises, and even some alien ships from Star Trek itself.
I mean, look at the Roman Dodero decks at being 1,200 meters and the Borg cube at 3,040 meters, both built back in TNG era, 170 years before the J was built. And let's not forget about the Voth City ship at 8,350 meters, or 8.35.
Dyson Sphere.
Yeah, but we didn't build that, though, or we didn't see that. So when you take those into account in the larger context, she is massive, but certainly not unheard of in terms of size for a spaceship.
So why did you make the decision to go just that huge? Longer mission profile, meaning it needed more crew and a very comfortable environment for them to operate and live in? Or just simply because it's the future and because it's big? So it's just a progression of what we've seen in Starship so far. So what was your thought process?
Well, I mean, it was both those things, really. You know, I wanted it to be more of a city than any starship that we had seen before, you know, that had residential areas and more cosmopolitan areas, and it's all quality of life, and you know, you might even have a lake with boats and things. I wanted it to have everything you might have in your community. It's not like you're sacrificing anything by leaving home, you know. And plus, I wanted a size that would make a lot of people go, what? You know, which it does. But the thing was that, for me, I'm an old science fiction fan, and I've read a lot of science fiction and all the classics and stuff like that. And to me, it's not all that big. You know, I'd like to say it was 20 miles long. You know, but no one would believe it. But seriously, a couple of miles isn't that long. A couple of miles. Look, I mean, you were here. You saw where my house was, and I pointed out where you could see Universal City, the Universal Studios from my house. That's 2 miles. That's how big the ship is. You still see the end of it. You know, I knew that people would react to it, but as a science fiction guy that I am, I never thought it was that amazingly large. You know.
And it is 5 iterations of Enterprise and 170 years. So you look at the NX-01 compared to the E, that follows. I mean, there is that natural progression, especially as you say, just the scale of mission increases, and a city in space, absolutely, why not? Makes sense.
Yeah. You know, I just wanted it to have a very, very diverse facilities and abilities and, you know, quality of life. And
so let's talk about what she's constructed of. You said that you feel as though she might have in fact been grown around a skeletal framework. Are you saying that she's in fact alive? Is it sentient as well, do you think? And can we speculate?
I would say yes. I would have to say yes.
To both?
You know, I mean, I remember I read a book, geez, it was probably back in the mid-70s, The Ship Who Sang. Anne McCaffrey? It was a story about how people who, if they were in a terrible accident, they couldn't save them, they still had their brain, or if they had terrible disabilities, they would put their brain into a ship, and they would become that ship, basically. It would be a human brain that was running it, and the ship was now the person's body. But I would say yes. I mean, right now we're struggling with issues of AI and capabilities of AI today, and there are people who are nervous about it. You know, what's another 50 years going to bring? You know, I would say almost certainly the ship is conscious and aware and intelligent.
But do you think Starfleet and the Federation would want that? I mean, obviously we see how technology evolved from the NX-01 to the E. Do you really think that's what we as a culture, as a Federational culture, would want? Even if it's practical based on what we have now, like the idea that would be the future, but would we want that, do you think?
Why
Or
not?
would it-
We wanted data, didn't we?
Would it make more sense to have the ship be alive?
Remember what Card said about seeking out new life? Well, here it is.
It is, yes.
Okay.
But I could get behind the fact that the ship's alive, but the crew is the actual brain. Each crew member is a different aspect of, or a different synapse that can.
The mind of the ship is a collaborator and crew person, just like anyone else. You know. We didn't mind Data because he was kind of shaped like us. You know, and we could identify with him. But what's the difference, really? You know,
it just seems risky having an organic life form that's got a sentience, because if the ship can fold space, go through time, I mean, if it gets infected, transformed, turned against you, there is no off switch in the same way. You know, it's organic.
Any crew or crew member could be that dangerous. You know,
but it's not in control of the ship, though. The ship being sentient itself.
Why aren't we worried about Data? Why aren't we worried about
because
Data?
he's not in control of the. We did take over the Enterprise.
He did take control. Yeah.
Turn on against us. Because it's the same argument, you know.
But Data individually can't fold space, go back in time and destroy the human race. He can do steps to maybe cause that, but he can't do it with very little effort. Especially if you say, you know, jumping before you left. I mean, Jay's under. If the Jay wants to go back and eliminate Earth, he could do it in less than a minute. Data can't do that. So there is a scale difference of threat.
If the writers write it, it could happen.
He's copping out, Stu. He's copping out.
No, we're not. This is true. I mean, Data could be dangerous. Look at how dangerous Lore was.
He was, yeah. Well, then one last question to that. Do you think the Enterprise?
We're not talking about shipping alive, though.
Okay.
I'm talking about construction techniques, and I mean, I think that we touched on this before, but even today, it's not going to be long before they're printing cars. They're going to print cars. They're going to print houses. They're going to print buildings. You know, they'll print starships. And not only will they print them, that you know, they may even grow them. You know, I mean, during World War II, I think I've told you this, that on some of the islands in the Pacific where they didn't have a lot of building materials, everything had to be flown in. What they would do is they'd take dynamite and they'd blow up coral reef, and then with bulldozers they'd take all those, you know, that's shattered stuff, spread it out into the shape of a runway, and take a steamroller and steamroll that thing until they had a nice flat runway to land on. And every day they had to water that runway with seawater. Otherwise it would die and fall apart. So why not? I mean, the potential for advancement and potential for unusual, strange technologies and approaches are so beyond anything we could imagine. I mean, Star Trek is kind of primitive, really, when you think about where it might really go.
Although, isn't the idea of growing something, in fact, a step back when you look at replication? Surely you would, if you can only, growing something, you need matter, it forms. But if you have a replicator, you can form anything with energy, and energy is plentiful. So why won't you just replicate the entire ship? Surely that's a step above growing, surely.
Maybe it has something to do with slipping in and out of a temporal warp, you know, that this living material allows us to fold space in a way that replicated material can't. You know, I mean, I think I've always said that I thought the original series Enterprise had like a warp glaze on it. It's, you know, when you look at it, the original ship is so much more like porcelain, like skin, like an aquatic animal than any of the other ships. I always liked that. It always looked like porcelain to me. You know, was it grown? Maybe it was grown. You know, like the shell on, you know, the oyster grows a shell. You know.
One last question on this sort of style. Do you think the Enterprise J is the exception to the rule of starship design at the time, or is it something more typical of the 26th century design aesthetic?
Well, I would say that you know, civilian stuff. Look, today when you look at, you know, the military and DARPA and stuff like that, they're 50 years ahead of what we're looking at now. You know, they don't tell us everything. They've got stuff in the works that's, you know, much more advanced than what we're using as civilians. They always do. They put a lot of time and money into it, and Starfleet's going to be the same way too. If you look at the original series, what I liked about the Enterprise and the other ships like it was that they were so unusual then on TOS that when people saw one, remember Harry Mudd and Mudd's Women? So this is a starship. Most people don't even get close to one. You know, they're like really unusual, very unusual. And I would say that the J is also extremely, extremely unusual, even in its time. There's a couple of others, you know, maybe there's 3 others, you know. But when people see it, they're like gobsmacked. They're, you know, a little amazed by it.
All right, so now let's talk about interiors. You've mentioned large parks, entertainment zones, universities. How do you see the interior configuration of the ship? Do you feel it's largely just open in the middle, or is she a generational ship? Do you think she has auxiliary craft construction bays and could be building like Defiant class size ships to act as escorts?
Yeah, why not? Why not? Oh, you want more?
We're almost finished, by the way. Just so
Yes.
You know, like I said, I would love to sit down and work some of this stuff out because I know that anything I could think up in a few minutes is not going to be crazy enough. It has to be really, it's really different, very unusual.
Well, by the way of breaking that down for you, do you think she's more luxurious, say, than the Enterprise D, which is, you know, known as sort of the luxury line of the... Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And like I said, all interior areas are, you know, are malleable, holodeck. Like the whole ship is a holodeck, you know. Everywhere you go, you know, it's not just one room you go to, you know.
Could it be that the ship's tied into your perception, so no matter where you go on the ship, you experience the environment you want?
Absolutely. And now we're talking.
Everyone else in the same space as you is having their own vision of what's going on?
Yes, I love that idea.
See, though, I see that as a problem because losing yourself in non-reality...
No, there's
reality,
you'd still be in a corridor, but it's a corridor that you've envisioned in your way. But the control...
There are times when you all have to see the same thing and perceive the same thing, and you will. When you go to 10 forward and you get drunk on synthahol, okay, as soon as you leave, you're not drunk anymore. You know, there's safeguards in place, you know. So that's the way I see that. If you want to be... You know, I do see it as being an entirely malleable experience to everybody who's on it. It could be whatever you want it to be, you know. I mean, like I said, it's such a far out ship that I've always told myself anything I could think up in 15 minutes is not going to be interesting, advanced, or far out enough to come up with enough stuff to make everyone say, that's impossible. Because everything has to be that way, you know.
Well, I will ask the next question, though you've sort of answered it, because that's what we do here. So, what about the main bridge? How do you see it looking, I guess, as the default version? Is it a multi-leveled thing? And do you think they'll be using neural links, just like with the Alice shuttle and Janeway's shuttle from Endgame, which is obviously technology we had very quickly, effectively having the computer be tied into each and every crew member's own minds, therefore increasing computational speed? And what is the future of internal space design besides the one corridor we saw? But you sort of already answered that. Malleable, it's a fluid experience almost.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is that you don't really need to have consoles with readouts and stuff like that. Everyone's got a HUD that floats around their head that no one else can see, you know, like Iron Man has, you know. Your console's with you everywhere you go. You know, you could be doing this and spinning information around and, you know, that sort of thing. You've got Minority Report all around your head, you know, just like Tony Stark has in Iron Man, you know. We have bridges. We'll spend time on bridges that do have those things simply because it's a fun exercise. It's historic, you know. Yeah, I mean, honestly, you don't, by the time that ship rolls around, and probably long before, we're not, you know, it could just be one boring sphere that one guy sits in the middle of, you know, like RoboCop sucking Slurpees to stay, you know, But of course, that's really boring. You don't want to.
Or you could think of it more like a Magneto. Oh, not Magneto. Professor X gets in his room, that big sphere, puts on a helmet, and then the world opens up, and he's controlling everything. That could be
Absolutely.
That's the pilot.
Yeah.
But we're basically at the end now, Doug. So the Enterprise J has been a ship which seems to be either loved or hated. What sort of reactions have you got from the fan base?
Yeah, they all. Every single one is loved and hated. Everyone.
And how do you feel about having made two Enterprises, the first and last in canon, and both with some extra controversial design points behind them?
It's fantastic. I love it. It's, the first and the last. Wow. How interesting is that? I hadn't thought about that. But
the Alpha and Omega.
Yeah. I mean, and the fact that they're both controversial, well, I think they've all been controversial. NX and the J, there was a lot of controversy because we had the internet for the first time, I think, probably. But almost every ship that's come after has been, or before, they're all loved and hated. I talk to people who hate the original series Enterprise. I think it's stupid looking. I've had people tell me that about the D. I love the D. I love the original. And it was like, I don't know where you're coming from, but it's your right to not like it. Look, I would be more upset if they didn't have an opinion, if they didn't care. The idea that they're arguing over it, debating it, two people fighting over it, that's awesome stuff. I think that's really great. The day that stops happening is not good, really, I think.
And do you think there's an overall based on input you've got, do you think people overall love it or less like the J? Like, what do you think the overall sort of consensus is that you've felt as the designer, having now had the internet and talked to people and such?
I think that it's a lot like politics, half the people love it, half the people hate it. It's just what we got going on here, I've told myself a long time ago, I said, because when you're first learning and you're trying to become an artist and stuff, it's easy to be crushed by people, who tell you it's good and stuff like that. And I learned quite a while ago. I mean, this is like my 34th year in the business. And quite a while ago, I learned that no matter what you do, half of them will hate it and half of them will love it. And that's just the way it is. So I never take offense. It never bothers me. I'm never upset, I mean, we could talk about it, and I could say, I don't know what's wrong with them. How come they don't understand? But I'm not stressing over it. I really, if you hate it, that's fine. That's great. Hating it and getting excited about it is really cool stuff. Keep it up. Keep being upset. It's not really a bad thing.
And lastly, as we always do here on Trekyards, what's your most favorite and least favorite thing about the design? And is there anything you would change now if CBS came to you and said they wanted an Enterprise J as a hero ship for 2019? What would you do?
Well, I'm a purist, and I feel that Star Trek should be treated as a period piece, And it's like if I was going to do Horatio Hornblower, I sure wouldn't give him, a 21st century destroyer just because it looks cooler. I wouldn't say, well, I could redesign that to look really cool. I believe in treating everything as if it really happened and finding a way to make it work. Yeah. I'm not for changing Kirk's ship at all. The only thing I would do with the J is it would be interesting to show how big it is by having a shuttle approaching it, and it keeps getting, it's like when they approach the Death Star or something like that. The closer you get, the more detail that you see. You see more interesting things happening that you would never see from the distance you need to be back to take in the whole thing. I mean, I had a conversation with Matt Jeffries. He said he was always arguing with Roddenberry. Roddenberry wanted plate panels and stuff like that on the ship. And Matt's thought was that would hurt the scale. He thought that hurt the scale to do that. And he fought it all the way and kept the original series ship pretty clean. And his reasoning was, in order to get back and see an aircraft carrier or a battleship, you got to be back far enough to the point where you're not seeing all that stuff. That kind of detail drops out, But I could see a great shot where you just can't even believe how long it's going to take to fly right up to the you know, to an airlock or something, you know.
Baseball 1 from Spaceballs takes 2.5 minutes to go across the screen.
But again, last time, what's your favorite and least favorite thing about the exterior design of the J?
Favorite and least favorite? You know, I mean, it's like one of my children. It is what it is, you know. I don't say I don't like.
But we make people pick their favorite children.
Daughter, she's got big ears, you know. I mean, it's you know.
Spindly ears.
It was something of that grew out of an assignment that had to be fulfilled real fast. To me, it's part of canon, and should not be played with. You know, you could enhance it, don't change it. It's a period piece. Is there anything I hate about it? No, there isn't anything I hate about it. I mean, I did other designs that I like equally as well, and actually some that I like a little more. You know, I really like the Altair, and I really like the one with the was it the Congo class? I think I called it the Congo class.
Congo class, one of my favorites.
You know, I really like it has a real heft to it. You know, with that secondary hull, and I think it just feels. Do I like those elements of it better than I like the J? Yeah, I actually do. You know, but I really like the J. The most satisfying thing about it to me is that it is controversial, that it creates arguments, and there are people who defend it and people who, you know, will fight it. You know, I think that means it's the fact that most of the ships that come before it, they don't usually say, well, that's engineering an impossibility. They couldn't possibly, you know, like the struts. The fact that they're fighting about that part of the design of the J means I succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. You know, I think that makes it a big success. It's a big success for that reason, you know. I'm proud of that. I'm proud there are people who think it's ridiculous. That's fantastic.
And on that wonderful note, I want to thank you, Doug, so much for joining us again for sort of a remaster of our original J episode. Back when we first met you, I think it really is. You know, we've got you guys, the real model, all the real assets. This episode has been an absolute blast to make, to really look at the details, look at the scale. I hope you had a lot of fun, Doug. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this redo, but I think we had a lot more. So thank you so much, Doug. And
that's great. Well, I look forward to seeing what you guys, looking forward to seeing it.
Cool. And as always, guys, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it around. I mean, share it to people, Star Trek fans that you know and that don't know about Trekyards. And
there'll be discussion. You know there will be because of this episode. Yeah.
You know, I was visiting a visual effects department recently, and some younger guy who was there recognized my voice from Trekyards.
That's
awesome.
Have you been
to Trekyards? And I'm like, yeah, I was their first guest ever, and that's where he knew me from Trekyards.
I love that.
That's a wonderful way of ending.
Yeah, I laughed. Okay. Yeah, so put that in your pipe and smoke it.
All right, so as always, guys, tune in next time for more awesomeness from Trekyards. But until then, I'm Captain Foley.
I'm Colonel Cockins.
And just old Doug.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
I'll see you guys.